So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name's Duncan Chappell. I'm your host for today's AR Forum webinar. And in this discussion, we're going to be talking about analyst relations and sales enablement, and especially on how to get sales enablement going in your company. But joining us today to discuss this pretty key aspect of any AR program are two seasoned senior analyst relations professionals, Robin Schaffer, an analyst relations professional at NICE Systems, and Andrew Reed, previously an AR leader at IBM and now one of my colleagues here at Kea Company. So both of these AR professionals bring a depth of knowledge that's going to allow today's webinar to really cover the topic and share a lot of the real world experiences that they've picked up over the decades. So we're going to be running through a lot of content over the next 45 minutes, and then at the end we'll have time if there are any questions and answers. So Robin Schaffer has over 22 years of strategic marketing communications and product marketing experience at AT&T and since 2004 at NICE Systems. She's brought a strategic customer experience focus to analyst relations at NICE Systems. And over the course of the last 2 years, she's developed a sales enablement program that has been really actively engaging over 30 of the biggest deals supporting the NICE sales force. Indeed, that's 30 just since February. Now, Andrew has spent more than 18 years in corporate communications and marketing, including 6 years at FileNet, where he led the analyst relations program and established a strong link between analyst relations and the sales team. After IBM's acquisition of FileNet, Mr. Reed was instrumental in managing their analyst relations program for enterprise content management, successfully maintaining leadership positions in some key signature research reports. So welcome very much to today's webinar. Andrew, I'd like to pass the microphone over to you to really introduce what we have to say on this fantastic topic of sales enablement.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Duncan, and let's dive right in. So the objectives for today's webinar really are, as Duncan said, to create, to help provide the first steps for creating that analyst relations and sales partnership. And we know as analyst relations professionals that we do support sales, but oftentimes it's from behind the scenes. And this is an opportunity really to get more visibility to the AR program, help sales and enable them to capture more revenue. And so it's really key to develop support from both the AR sponsors, generally corporate communications or corporate marketing role, as well as the sales leadership. And that's critical so that they're really aware of what's going on, what needs to happen, and who's on the hook for certain responsibilities to make all of this happen the way that it really should. So we'll be talking today about some of the key concepts to build that foundation. What are the ways to get started, because oftentimes that first step is one of the most difficult. So how do you lay that foundation, get started, and create a program that can then be built on and expanded over time? So some of the key concepts really, as I mentioned, is that partnership. Oftentimes I would say AR is sort of the wing under sales wings, and it's there, it's supporting them, but they're not always aware of it. And here's an opportunity for an AR professional really to be sitting in the co-pilot seat and really assisting sales with determining how to best approach an opportunity, how to mitigate perhaps negative analyst interaction within that sales opportunity, or how to expand on a positive recommendation that an analyst might be giving prospective end user that's looking to purchase technology from your company. This enablement program really does provide that competitive edge, and it also allows the quantification of that edge. It's not just oh, we feel like we're competing better and that the analysts like us. It's how do we create some metrics associated with that. So and then part of that is managing expectations as well. A lot of AR professionals are one person within a larger organization, and sometimes those expectations can get inflated from the sales perspective. and we have to make sure that we're managing those and that we can appropriately fulfill our responsibility as part of this partnership. And then finally, I mentioned the phased approach, and the analysts will often recommend this in terms of software implementations. Have a pilot, get some early successes, build on that success, and expand the program over time. So the key question initially is, are your sales teams helped or hurt by the influence of the analysts? And certainly we would, as AR professionals, as we go about our activities and we drive interactions and we get mind share with the analysts and we help them understand how our offerings are differentiated and better, we certainly feel like we're helping, but we also have to be sure that we're aware of some of the negative perceptions out there by certain analysts and that we can mitigate that. So it's really key to ask yourself this question, and what are we really doing in terms of sales and how they can really expand on their knowledge of the analysts and those analysts within a certain deal, and how they can really capture additional revenue by understanding how the analysts work. Robin, I know you've got some thoughts on this in terms of perception by sales and whether they're being helped or hurt.
Yeah, I think we all know that sales can both be helped and hurt, and the question that I ask myself is whether we're passive beneficiaries or victims of the analyst's influence, and whether there are things that we can do to steer the influence in our direction. And before I started to really concentrate on working the AR sales partnership, all I heard about were stories where the analysts hurt us. And I'm sure that what I heard was, just the tip of the iceberg. And you may share this, I never heard where the analysts helped us. So I was blind to that. And I believe it's a symptom of the sales team not being aware of the analysts in their deals.
Yeah, we had an interesting exercise at our sales kickoff at FileNet. We would have the competitive intelligence team would go through the CRM system, and they would compile the top 10 reasons sales won a deal and the top 10 reasons sales lost a deal. And this was done, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but inevitably the reason that the salesperson won a deal was I understood the needs of the customer. I sent flowers to his wife on Mother's Day. I remembered his kid's birthday, all the things that they knew the account inside and out. Inevitably, when it came to the reasons why they lost the deal, number one, an analyst threw me under the bus. So it's easy, I think, to use the analyst as a scapegoat, and honestly, I think even prospects will do that. They don't necessarily want to say I didn't choose you. They can easily say, well, we talked to an analyst firm, and they said that we should go this other direction. So they can sometimes deflect the blame from themselves over to the analyst and maybe feel a little bit better about telling a salesperson that they didn't win a deal. So that's sort of a good context setting, and I think helps us understand how sales sometimes perceives analysts and or doesn't perceive, and oftentimes, as you mentioned, Robin, we hear about it at the 11th hour. Hey, everything was going great and it just got derailed. Well, honestly, that analyst was probably involved in that sales process way earlier than the salesperson was aware, and so that's why we definitely want sales to understand what they need to do and the processes that they need to go through to discover what's going on relative to analysts involved in a particular opportunity. So now we have to talk about how we get started with this program. So obviously, in terms of moving forward, you always want to look at where you are. So what are the objectives that you currently have between AR and sales? Is there any, service level agreement that is perceived or perhaps even codified in some way between AR and sales? And generally, I would say there isn't. So it's sometimes a more, a tenuous relationship. It's not actually established and codified in this, as I said. And again, that goes to what's the organizational relationship? Is it, sales calls in once in a while and says, send me the latest Magic Quadrant, I need it for a deal? Or are people on the sales team really aware of how the analysts work and getting involved early on? And and that points to some of the sales training. So as I mentioned, and most software companies will have some sort of a sales kickoff. Here are the latest products. Here's our roadmap. Here's what we want to present to our prospects and customers. How much is AR getting involved in those educational opportunities? How can you insert yourself into that and provide a value add to that training to help raise awareness of AR and how it can help? And then that client service, as I mentioned, are you a one-person AR team, if you will, with 300 sales folks? Are you a three-person AR team with 3,000 sales folks? So what is the ratio, and what is really the level of service that you're ready to commit to? And then what tools can you provide? It's great to make them aware, and then they come back and say, hey, I've got this opportunity. An analyst is involved. What can you do to help me? You have to have a little tool bag and some tools that you can share with sales to help them through that opportunity and navigate through some of the issues that they might encounter relative to the analysts involved in that. And then finally, the information resources are the things that you can do that are passive in a sense. I mean, you can have a portal or an internal blog that has a variety of key questions that, an FAQ, what do I do in this particular scenario? And that can help provide a little bit more air cover for you, especially if you're a smaller AR organization or a single AR practitioner within an organization. That can help provide a broader reach without as much labor intensivity, I guess I would say, and I totally made up a word. But and then as I mentioned earlier, what are the metrics? And oftentimes, honestly, AR has struggles with that. We know that we help drive more revenue. We know that we help win more deals, but it's very difficult sometimes to quantify that, and especially when sales isn't as aware that an analyst may actually be helping in the background, and they won the deal because they understood the needs of the customer. In reality, an analyst may have also been influencing that in a positive manner. So, Robin, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that, in terms of the current state and evaluating your own program.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about what was going on in my organization, perhaps to give some, context to a lot of these points. Like, so for example, we did not have any objectives for AR in sales in my organization when we started. It was like, seems like a good idea, go see what you can do to positively influence. And so what I focused on in terms of metrics was not to try to measure revenue. I recognize that over time I can probably do that, but in the beginning I just focused on two things. First of all, just a little background, I chose to focus on, for obvious reasons, our largest sales teams that had the biggest deals. And I figured that would, we're going to talk about pilots in a minute, but that would control the program. So I set myself an objective of engagement, which I arbitrarily set up as I want the salespeople coming to me twice a month. That was a pretty low bar, to proactively come to me to ask for support and bring me a deal that I can influence. So that meant to me that they're getting it, and they see the value. And then the other metric that I measure is the number of deals that I am influencing in some way. In some way, the analysts are helping move that deal along, overcoming objections, or just moving the sales cycle forward, giving us an edge in the competitive situation. And I set myself a goal of 10 deals for the year. Pretty low, because already since February I've impacted 31 deals. So clearly in the beginning you under promise and over deliver, which I've seemed to have done. So that's my, I've done a lot of the other things on this chart. The organizational relationship, just one more point. Before I started to proactively do this, there was zero, and sales had no idea that AR existed, that the program existed, that we were briefing analysts, that we had good relationships with analysts. So there was no connection when I started this. Those are just a couple of points that I think might be helpful to people.
Yeah, and I think that's key. And thanks for sort of the tales from the trenches there, because sometimes we establish sort of these parameters for a program, and you don't always have to stick strictly by what might be recommended. You have to figure out what works within your organization, and I mean, at the very least, it sounds like, Robin, that you're in line for a big raise at the end of the year because you just totally knocked it out of the park. So great job on that. And honestly, I think any AR professional that can say that they influence 30 or 31 deals in any time period is definitely on the right track and doing the right things, regardless of what kind of formal framework might be around that. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
So let's look at the recruiting the key participants, because oftentimes AR is working within that marketing sphere and in that global organization, and sales tends to be in their own sphere and often in their own little worlds. Not to begrudge anything from the sales perspective, they've obviously focused on trying to win revenue, and as a salesperson, it's always what have you done for me lately? So they need to we really need to engage with the sales leadership and help them understand what's going to be required. By the same token, as you pointed out, Robin, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So we can't be the Lone Ranger running out there and running willy-nilly trying to help folks wherever trouble pops up. So oftentimes, as you pointed out, you wanted to align yourself with where the greatest amount of revenue was in play, and help capture the lion's share of that. Also, sales leadership tends to be very protective of their sales folks. No, we don't want to have them spend an hour learning about AR. They need to be out selling. So that's why we want to try to get into some of the existing mechanisms that are used to educate sales and to train them. And then sales folks are just bombarded by information on a regular basis, and I think even product information can bounce off of them as they focus on the products that they know and have sold for perhaps a few years. They often will even ignore some of the new innovations that might make them more competitive, and then try to add to that some additional. If it says it's coming from corporate marketing, that often will end up in the email dustbin without even being read. So it's definitely a process, and I think the key thing is to take these small steps as we're describing in a pilot phase to help get the information across without being cumbersome to the sales folks, and not overpromising what we can do and then not being able to deliver, and obviously that creates all sorts of problems when that occurs. Any additional thoughts on the Lone Ranger status, Robin?
Yeah, definitely. I really am very aligned with everything on this slide. And one thing I wanted to say is that I've had two major companies that I've worked with. Duncan mentioned I was with AT&T for 13 years, and I've been with NICE for 10 years. And in both of those jobs, I had a lot of interface with sales in all kinds of different roles. So AR actually brought me, for the first few years I was doing it, more distant from sales than I ever had been. But the point I wanted to make is, even though AT&T had 5,000 reps or more, and my company NICE has a couple hundred reps, the challenges and these facts on this slide were exactly the same. So I suspect it's pretty similar in your organization. And the one thing that I spent a lot of time with is understanding the ecosystem of information, training, issues, processes in our sales force. And the one partner that helped me a lot was the field marketing team, the regional field marketing team that works to get all information and works closely with sales. They were extremely helpful so that I could really understand how to fit within the existing structures.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is, as a, either as a single person or a small team, the ability to make yourself seem like you've got greater coverage is critical. It sounds like you did exactly that, and be able to create a broader reach than people might have expected from a single resource. So that's a good approach, and thanks for sharing some of that. So I will just wrap up this section with some of the key considerations and what other resources might be brought to bear. So in building this bridge to sales, it's really critical to get active executive sponsorship. And I think the toughest part is probably getting the sales leadership, because they will look at this potentially as something that will distract their sales folks from their key responsibility, which is, of course, winning deals. So helping the sales leadership understand the benefits that you can bring and how it might actually streamline some of these sales processes. I think there's situations where an analyst involvement may actually help a sales rep understand when to stop pursuing a particular deal. I mean, we had an opportunity once with it was a household name, a great opportunity. We were presenting our solution that was trying to displace an existing one, and we had all sorts of better total cost of ownership, better ROI, better performance, all the things that a company should say, absolutely, we want to buy this product from you and replace what we currently have. But and the perception was that there was an analyst involved, and that the analyst was predisposed to this installed product and did not like the offering that we had. We actually were able to get on a phone call with the analyst, with the salesperson, with the AR professional, discuss the specific opportunity, and find out that really it was the person who was leading the project within that household name company that really only understood the product that they had. If they were to take on this new product, they didn't have the background, they didn't have the skills. They were essentially going to be choosing themselves out of a job. And in that scenario, the salesperson all of a sudden said, wow, okay, now I understand what I'm up against. And in many cases, that's insurmountable. So it's time to cut bait. And I think from a sales perspective, time is critical, and pursuing deals that may never come to fruition obviously won't help the overall achievement of success. So it's interesting sometimes how analysts can be brought to bear to even provide that type of insight. So those are types of stories that sometimes, when shared with sales leadership, help them understand as well. But you're not trying to provide an additional layer of responsibility or taking additional time from the sales folks. You're helping them manage it more effectively and more efficiently. So and again, getting some of the commitments from sales leadership. Another example might be trying to get client references. I know many companies struggle when they submit their spreadsheets for Magic Quadrants and Forrester Waves and all of those things. It says, please submit 3 to 5 client references. Well, we have an install base of 13,000, and we have a hard time coming up with 3 to 5. Maybe there's a way that we can get sales leadership to buy into adjusting the sales contract to say, just have a line. Are you willing to serve as a customer reference, once you're implemented? And at least leave it up to the customer to decide, yes, I will, or no, I won't. But oftentimes that question isn't even asked, and that might be another way that there can be a symbiotic approach that helps both the AR effort as well as sales. And then having the key points of contact, because it can't be 300 people interacting with 3 people and trying to figure out who's going to do what. Really need to have some key ownership points and who's going to control the flow of information back and forth. And then getting the, as I mentioned, that executive sponsorship and having it really committed in the sense of, I'm not sure you necessarily have a written document. There might be at least an email trail, but rather than just a wave of the hand, yeah, sure, we'll do that, something that really gets their commitment and locks them into that. And then, as you had mentioned, Robin, you're working with specific groups of sales folks and the sales managers, and maybe there's some that understand how the analysts are involved and maybe get it a little bit more, and you certainly want to leverage those folks and get them involved. And then, as I mentioned earlier, using that existing sales infrastructure, how are you delivering training, how are you delivering information, rather than creating an additional vehicle, let's use what's already there. And then based on all of that, can I do this? Is it sustainable? If there's early success, will someone commit to adding additional resources and making sure that we can expand this program moving forward? And then going to the next slide on the third-party firm roles, here's where perhaps you can expand some of your resources, expand some of your reach without having to get sign-off necessarily from corporate marketing for, say, another full-time headcount. So there are organizations out there like Kea Company that can provide some of the support without having to add that full-time headcount. They can also be these organizations can be an objective outside third party to look at how perhaps things are working and recommend some improvements and really take some of that work and spread it across more people, and again without having your organization commit to another full-time headcount. So now we get sort of the meat of it. Now where do you start? You're taking that first step. What are the objectives for your pilot phase? And really it's establishing some credibility. You have to get some of those early wins, and maybe it's completely outside of the pilot program. You haven't even started it yet, but you've worked with a couple of sales folks who seem to understand how this works. You've demonstrated the value that AR can deliver, besides just sending an email with the latest Gartner report attached to it, and establish that credibility at a level above where a librarian that can provide research. Now it's how can we actually drive an opportunity to a successful outcome. And then the other is, I mean, sometimes you do have to be reactive. It's not the best case scenario, but sometimes one of those 11th hour, hey, an analyst is disrupting a deal, might be an opportunity to come in and again demonstrate that value by providing some insight into perhaps how that analyst is thinking, or again engage directly with the analyst and find out some information that would help either further that deal or indicate to a salesperson that it's time to cut bait and move on to the next one. And then Robin, to your point, you've already shared some good war stories, and I think within the context of creating the partnership and the relationship, sharing some of that with the sales leadership can really help kind of open their eyes to, all right, AR can definitely help us, it can help drive revenue, it can help win more deals, and based on that you establish some key connections that can then help that pilot project move forward. So, Robin, I know we sort of touched on this war stories, and you shared some of them. Is it hard to get those? I mean, I guess they don't just necessarily fall into your lap, and oh, hey, great, here's an awesome war story. I can take this up to the marketing leadership and sales leadership and share that. It sounds like something that almost like customer references. Sometimes it's a little tough to extract this information.
Yeah, I actually tried to get war stories to kind of kick off my process and was extremely unsuccessful. So I came to the conclusion I had to build them. I had to start working with sales, convince them in the beginning, even though I didn't have war stories or examples of where analysts helped. I had to convince them that there was potential there, and then rather quickly built the war stories and got the people that saw the benefit to, ask them directly, can you send me an email with a couple of sentences about how the analyst helped you? So those became and are becoming my selection of war stories that I could use in a variety of ways.
Got it. Good. That's good info. And yeah, and I guess we don't want to indicate that they're easy to come by. So it does take some effort sometimes. And as you point out, it's creating some of the relationships with some key folks that can are actually willing to respond and provide that information, and that's critical. So moving on to the next slide around the pilot and some of the operational objectives and the pilot group selection. It's and we've talked to a lot of these points, but certainly good to keep in mind that it's not about what AR wants or needs, it's really about what sales needs, and that's especially I think when talking to the sales force and sales leadership, it's really important to couch your comments and requests in the context of, how can I help you, salesperson? How can I help you, sales leadership, achieve the goals that have been set forth for you? And rather than, hey, I'm the AR person and I want to do this, it's I think really important to make sure you're listening to what sales needs and wants, and responding appropriately to that, and discussing it in those terms. And then again, this is perhaps challenging in some ways, but systematically collecting data. I think that sales leadership often has a hard time even getting sales folks to update CRM systems just for their deals, let alone adding another field that says, are analysts involved. But if that can be done and that data can be collected, then certainly you start to gain a better insight into how much the analysts really are impacting business, and can respond appropriately. And then, as we said, just like software, let's create a proof of concept. This is what we think we can do out of the gate, and by achieving those goals, we can then develop the credibility over time with sales leadership, because I think there will be some skepticism at first, and it's good, I think, to be able to continue beyond the pilot phase with a real strong foundation of credibility between AR and sales. And then obviously you want to test, and I mean, it almost sounds like a software implementation guide, a lot of the same principles. So test the processes, make sure that you can provide the service level that you've agreed to, and then based on that, you're in a position to gather some of the sales reps' testimonials, and perhaps those war stories that you had to extract with some difficulty, Robin, become a little bit easier, and maybe even volunteered in some ways, or in some instances, which would be great. So moving on to the pilot group selection, we touched on some of this. You definitely want to work with folks who may already have an understanding or indicate that they have an understanding of how the analysts work, or maybe you've been able to work with them in a couple of deals, and so they have gained that understanding through the work that you've done with them. But I think start small, pick a finite group. It's here's our vertical industry team for insurance, or here's our enterprise team for large deals, and create that group as a pilot, and make sure that that's successful by starting small and then building on that. And then certainly within that small group, it's perhaps you get that sales manager and say, hey, I want to join your sales call once a month, and just give everyone a quick update, remind them that AR is here to help, and maybe provide a little bit of insight into some of the testimonials or war stories that may have been shared up to that point. And so those, there are a few, I guess, opportunities to create pilot groups. As I mentioned, there it might be a major account team. It might be something that's focused on a particular market segment, but start small and build on that.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments on that, Andrew, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there were a few of all the things on this slide, there were a few things that jumped out at me that I wanted to comment on. I could not get decent data on the sales deals impacted by analysts by looking internally. And it dawned on me, and it was very successful, that I simply went to the analyst. I went to the analyst that has the most impact on our deals, and I asked him, how many times a week or month, is he talking about my company with buyers? Having a conversation, basically, and advising someone where we are part of the conversation. And the answer came out to be about once a day, 5 times a week, 20 times a month. And that changed everything in terms of getting a lot of attention, because there was a lot of resistance to believing that the analysts had that much impact. And as soon as I waved that banner, everybody paid attention, from the sales leadership down to the individual reps, because in my company, we focus on the top end of the market. We have like over 80 of the Fortune 100 as our customers, and that's where our sweet spot is. So when we're talking about deals, we're generally talking about very big deals. So that got a lot of attention, and I recommend doing that. The other thing that, in addition to focusing on individual sales teams, and I totally agree that one of my most successful activities was developing that personal relationship with the sales teams. I had calls with them where I just said, here, give me a deal that you're working on, and let's talk through how an analyst could help with it. That was very successful. And the other thing I want to say is, I think I said two, and now I have three things, is in addition to a pilot group within the organization of salespeople, I focused on one analyst. Like I said before, I look at all the analysts that have influence, and there's one that rises to the top, and I focused on influencing that analyst. And we have a pretty wide portfolio of solutions, and there's a core, which most people have, a core that drives most of the revenue, and I focused on that core. So I really not only focused internally on a pilot group, I focused on what solutions I would focus on and what analysts I would work with to have impact.
I think that's excellent, excellent feedback, and great points. And to that first point, I agree. I think a lot of folks just, there's so much focus on the published research. Where are we in the Magic Quadrant? Where are we in the wave? Where are we in the cool vendors report? Or did we make the cool vendors report? It's I think really important that, and even I think corporate marketing doesn't always grasp this. Sales certainly oftentimes does not grasp this, but these analysts are doing 800 to 1,000 calls a year, and as you point out, it could be once a day, and I mean I'm sure that was an eye opener, and so absolutely, I think great point, and good to make sure that people are aware of the power of the spoken word versus just the published research. So let's move on to some of the initiatives that would help support this pilot phase, and we actually just really talked about this first one, the basic understanding of the analyst. Look beyond the published research and understand that they're having conversations with people on a regular basis and helping them through these decision processes, and that can have way more impact in most cases than a report, even that might throw you into an unwanted quadrant, or into a lower portion of a wave. Understand that we can still have a positive impact, and frankly that analyst might still have a very positive view of your products, even though they may not appear in that leader segment of that particular report. And then help the sales folks understand how to respond. So, and I think the key thing there is make sure they're asking the question very early on. Are you working with an analyst firm or with analysts to help you make this decision? And depending on how forthcoming they are with the information, you can then find that you might even be able to identify the specific analyst just based on your technology as well as the type of organization that's making the purchase. But at least even if you don't know which analyst firm is involved, just knowing that analysts are involved can totally change the approach from a sales perspective on how you win that opportunity. And then, as we've mentioned a couple of times, don't add an additional communication vehicle. Don't add an additional training session, standalone. Weave it into existing sales training programs, into existing sales communications vehicles. Make sure that you're trying to work within that sales infrastructure versus trying to create an AR sales infrastructure that will be a different channel, if you will. And then, when you do have that opportunity to do the training, make sure that it's impactful, that it's short. Just nail it. 15 minutes on a sales training call. Maybe half an hour on stage at a sales training kickoff. Generally, with the right content, you can really have an immediate impact. And what's great is when you have the opportunity to do that afterward, when everyone's at the bar or on the golf course or whatever's happening around that event, having people come up and say, hey, I really appreciate you giving us that information. Let me tell you about what I'm dealing with. And all of a sudden, some of those testimonials and war stories start to emerge. And then, some of the tools, obviously, reprints and things like that that can be brought to bear. Oftentimes, I think that there's a term silver bullet that's been used for when a report comes out, AR can digest that, pull out some of the key points, share that with sales. It's very short, concise, helps them respond to it, or it might be a value add in terms of here's how you can use this to further an opportunity, or perhaps break down some resistance to within a sales opportunity that you might be working on. And then we talked about some of the larger, I guess, parts of the initiative. I mean, a pilot program doesn't necessarily have to have an AR portal for sales on your intranet. It's great if you do, but if there are other ways that you can post some of the reference material and some of the and really, it's we're not really supposed to be depending on the license that you have with your analyst organization, with the analyst firm that you're working with their research, as you consume that. In many instances, we're not supposed to be sending that willy-nilly around and honestly, a lot of times that's not really helpful. It's better to have some sort of commentary associated with that, distill the key facts from that analyst report and share that rather than the entire report. And oftentimes that can be more useful for sales as well. And then figure out whether it's going to be something you're going to try to customize, and sometimes that's it can be a challenge, or it's hard to segment things that way, but it might be, hey, here's how this technology is being used in this particular vertical market. You might then address that to the 6 people who represent that vertical sales team. But honestly, a lot of times, just based on bandwidth, it's better to take a little bit more general approach and try to ingest the analyst firm research and share that then with the sales team in a distilled format on a generalized basis. And then figure out what kind of support you can provide. Again, a lot of it is about ratios and how many salespeople are you trying to support. And again, it goes back to why the pilot is so important. Pick that smaller group. Determine, is it because they're easy to work with? Is it because they understand some of the analyst activity? Is it because they represent 60% of the revenue of your organization, and that's at the greatest risk? But determine how you're going to set up that support. And as you mentioned earlier, Robin, you want to under-promise and over-deliver, and that can definitely get things started off on the right foot. So just to wrap up, I know we're getting to a point in the webinar where I think we're right on time. Oh, yes, we are. So just to recap, really the key thing is creating a relationship, a partnership between analyst relations and sales. What that does, it elevates AR status within the organization. You're not someone who's just sending stuff to the analyst, having an occasional phone call, and then seeing what happens. You're actively engaged. You're determining how analysts are impacting specific opportunities, and hopefully helping to further the positive ones and mitigate the negative ones, and get sales leadership buy-in that you are an important part of this process, and that there needs to be some time spent thinking, by the sales folks, thinking about how analysts are going to be involved in a particular opportunity. And then that absolutely gives a sales team a competitive edge. It's, as I said before, sometimes we're sort of, air cover or wind under the wings, and here's an opportunity to actually be, helping to fly the plane, helping guide a salesperson in the right direction, give them a push in the right direction, and let them do what they do best without having to, and with the full understanding of how analysts may be involved, and as a result, they'll be more successful in terms of how they approach that particular opportunity. Critical, though, is managing expectations, and we already talked about the under promise and over deliver. Want to make sure that everyone's on board with what to expect, what's possible, and if in fact that pilot program is successful and you want to expand it, what needs to happen from a resource perspective, whether you're going to add an internal headcount, whether it makes sense to do that, whether you're going to go out to a third party to help support the program and provide some of the framework around that, and then taking that phased approach to build on that success of the pilot program and expand that then across the sales organization. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Robin, I don't know if you have any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, I have one that I've heard the concern a lot of people in AR who are buried with work and really concerned about opening this Pandora's box. And what I did, well, actually, for the beginning, I kind of spread a pretty wide net because I wanted to start to engage. But my intention is when it starts getting too busy for the amount of time I've carved out for this, then I just raise the threshold, meaning I'm only going to work on deals that are over a certain value. And I can put that threshold wherever I want it to control the amount of work. So I wanted to share that because I do know that that is a big concern of people looking at AR and sales. How am I going to manage that?
Yep, I think that's an excellent point. And obviously, that represents a lion's share of the revenue, depending on where that threshold lies. But thinking about the bigger dollar opportunity certainly makes sense, and that's a good approach to create that threshold and determine what work comes out of that. So, Robin, thanks so much for your insight and your tales from the trenches, and really appreciate you joining us today to discuss this important topic. And with that, I don't know if we have any questions. Appears that I don't see any right now. Duncan, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, thanks very much to both you and to Robin. We actually do have a few questions that have been submitted by people listening to the webinar. Just to start off, Robin, a question for you: how were you able to demonstrate that you influenced 31 deals?
Well, basically, when I count to 31, those are the ones that I got involved with, where I had a discussion with the salesperson, we made a plan, and we set the plan in motion. Because I've only been doing this since February in this format, I don't have a lot of results yet because we have very long sales cycles. So all I have is feedback from the salespeople saying, that was really effective. I got really good insights from the analyst if we had a call with the analyst. My customer really responded. They're planning to talk to an analyst to get the third-party validation. A lot of times I'm offering or suggesting that the salespeople, where we know that an analyst is very positive about us in certain product area, that they push the customer to get that third-party validation. So, I'll get feedback from the salespeople, and that's what I have to go by right now. I expect to and plan to continue to, I'm kind of a nudge. I keep nudging them, and you have to nudge them to get that feedback. Where's the deal? How's it going? Is there anything else I can help you with to move it along? So it's anecdotal at this point.
And Andrew, a question for you. Is there a difference in how effective you can be as an AR pro trying to enable sales in a giant firm like IBM versus perhaps a more normal sized firm like FileNet? I mean, did you feel a difference there?
Absolutely, and it's funny because I was just thinking about that even before you answered the question or asked the question rather. I would say that at a smaller organization, you're much closer to the sales force. There are people that you can, see walking in the halls of the office. There are folks that you might actually know by name, and some of the mechanisms that you can use to interact with them can be, I guess, more creative or innovative. I would say at the large organizations, there are several layers between you and that sales force, and it's sometimes tough to penetrate all of those layers and get direct access. So a lot of what you're doing at the large organization is creating that air cover and not necessarily getting involved in very specific deals. At the smaller organizations, I mean, as an example, at one of the sales training um, kickoffs, I actually brought a whole bunch of cigars, and I called myself Cigar Man, and I passed out cigars that had, don't get, derailed by the analysts on the band, and it was, sort of something out, thinking out of the box. I was trying to think of something that people might like. People were snapping them up, and honestly, a lot of people didn't even know my real name. They just knew me as Cigar Man after a while. So it was effective in terms of they knew who I was and what I could do, and it created a link, apart from just here's our professional connection. And I think that was very helpful in furthering this AR sales partnership. A large organization, for one, a lot of those types of mechanisms aren't really allowed or encouraged, so it's tough to do that, and it is tougher to have that direct interaction, so you do end up doing more sort of air cover versus specific deal support.
And one final question, I mean, maybe for both of you, actually. Um, if you were unable to leverage AR as a tech vendor, what would you be missing out on? Or maybe what would it take you longer to achieve? Or perhaps what might you not be able to achieve if you were unable to leverage AR? Robin, maybe would you like to pick up on that one first?
Well, it's a great question, and um, I would say, well, first of all, I have a phrase of brief and hope, meaning that was a lot of what I was doing prior to actively leveraging AR in the sales process. We would brief and brief and brief, inquiries, strategy days, and hope that it was influencing deals. And I think what I've gained from this whole initiative is a sense of not control. I need a softer word from control. Steering the analyst interactions in our favor and taking some sense of proactive, control over our destiny. And I think that that's what you miss. You're in the brief and hope arena if you're not doing this kind of initiative.
And Andrew, what's
And
your
I would
take
add to
on?
that. Sorry, go ahead, Duncan.
No, I was just asking you, Andrew, what's your take on that?
So I was just going to add, and I think what working with the analyst helps is to establish a context for your offering. So a lot of times I think a sales force will think we've got the latest and greatest. This is the best approach. This product is amazing. And by working with AR, you start to understand where maybe another technology area is starting to bleed over into the area that you're operating in and might be disrupting it to a certain extent, or you're finding out where another vendor might have added a capability that has really extended the power of a particular technology offering. So I think working with AR helps to set a context and not necessarily just thinking in a vacuum. I've got the best product and I'm going to go out and sell it everywhere. It's how do I most effectively sell this product given some of the other players in the market, some of the other potential disruptions that may occur. And I think by working with AR, you therefore get, and if AR is working effectively to get that information inbound, I mean, I think, Robin was talking about the brief and hope. That's the outbound component, and they're not always. AR can help provide that inbound insight from the analyst as well to help set the context to, what that competitive environment really looks like.
Well,
Couldn't agree more.
so thank you very much. Our hour is almost up. Sadly, I mean, I know the conversation could continue longer, but I know that we have to draw an end on it. Robin Schaffer, Andrew Reed, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. For those of you who are listening, we're going to continue to provide additional guidance for extending the foundation of the partnership between AR and sales through 2 more webinars on the topic. And of course, we'll be expanding on other areas of analyst relations in future webinars as well. So please join the Analyst Relations Forum group on LinkedIn to get future updates. And Robin and Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Bye.